Arizona Secretary of State Adrian, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to start with the big news Tuesday when you certified a voter-led ballot measure giving Arizonans a direct say in whether abortion in the state should be constitutionally protected. Tell us the language of the proposition, and do you expect it to pass?
Well, thanks for having me. We have a very strong citizen legislature process here in Arizona where the people can propose laws. This is a constitutional amendment. Under Proposition 139 is the number, which will allow for abortions. The details you can find, I think it's up to 24 weeks and some other specifics. The bottom line is this, for me, is a record. Concerned with the processes more than anything, we saw a record number of petitions turned in. You saw them coming off that truck there, over 800,000 possible signatures. We certified 577,000 of them. The last record for turned in signatures was about 500,000. So this has been a massive effort by the citizens of the state of Arizona, and they really want to see this on the ballot.
Do you think that putting abortion on the ballot will have a secondary effect on who voters ultimately elect on November 5th?
Well, not as the secretary, but as an elected Democrat, I can say absolutely. This is an incredibly important piece of the freedom agenda that the Democrats have launched through our new presidential candidate. It's incredibly important because in Arizona, we don't like people telling us what to do. And when you've got folks trying to force folks into, force anybody into decisions with especially what they can do with their bodies, that's problematic politically. So I think this is going to be a big boost for Democrats in Arizona. But again, that commentary is as an elected Democrat, not as the Secretary of State. We've got to separate our duties from our opinions in this office.
Understood. And I want to turn to the issue of election security. As Secretary of State, you're Arizona's chief election officer. You've cited complaints from 2022 saying that voters were intimidated then by election watchers. But last week, a Maricopa County judge blocked enforcement of your state's voter intimidation rules, saying they violated free speech. What's your response?
Well, my response to the Free Enterprise Club, who brought this, is, what about the peaceable assembly First Amendment rights of the voters? The government makes folks stand in a line during a time, and we don't want them harassed or intimidated. And if some weirdo wants to come scream at people, we've got to be able to enforce some peace and quiet. We've got to be able to be civilized in the way we execute our elections. I know the Free Enterprise Club does not believe the same. I hope their donors take note of what's happening here in Arizona, and I hope the court eventually checks them. We will be appealing the decision because what this does really is it pits the First Amendment right to free expression of folks who want to disrupt our elections against the voters themselves and our election workers. We need to protect our democracy, and I will not let this go quietly. I'm going to stand firm on the side of our voters.
The New York Times reported earlier this month President Trump asked donors to help him stop the steal. Do you still receive threats from people who believe falsely that election fraud is rampant?
Well, as a matter of fact, I am unfortunately among many in the nation who are still suffering these kinds of threats. Just Sunday evening in Arizona, an election official did receive a swatting threat at their home. Luckily, they were working already closely with local law enforcement, and the situation did not go awry. It went as scripted, and it's important that we continue to stay vigilant. But it is that kind of rhetoric, it is that kind of misinformation, and it's those kinds of lies that are causing this sort of violence in what ought to be the most civil of civilian exercises, and that is running our democracy in a reasonably peaceful manner. Have the debate, have the argument about the politics, but threatening or intimidating voters or elections officials is anti-American. And again, we're going to continue to fight against those efforts made by some folks who are continuing to grift for political purposes or personal gain.
How do you ensure the safety of poll workers going forward, and have such threats made it difficult to find poll workers in the first place?
Well, that's the tough spot that the Free Enterprise Club is trying to push us away from. Our guidelines that are under the lawsuit you mentioned earlier, really trying to give them some leverage and to standardize the rules that we have. Now, it's still against the law to harass or intimidate folks, but to be able to give standardized guidelines across the state is what we were trying to do. And there's folks that are just trying to disrupt things, cause chaos. and uncertainty. And it's that kind of unpredictability that we've got to fight against. It's bad for society. It's bad for business. It's bad for science and law and medicine and education. And we've got to get back to some reasonable discourse, some reasonable way of behaving amongst ourselves. And we've got to get away from this nonsense that, threatening violence is actually a thing in the United States of America and here in Arizona. We must get back to being a civil society. We have to protect our democracy.
Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, we thank you so much for your time.